Then the German tank PZ. 3 stunned Soviet engineers on tests. Hey, tank enthusiasts, if you're into epic stories about military tech, jaw-dropping discoveries, and how they shaped history, you're in for a treat. Hit that subscribe button to catch more awesome content like this, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. It's the summer of 1940, and World War II is heating up across Europe. The United States is still watching from the sidelines, but over in the Soviet Union, engineers get their hands on something extraordinary. A German tank called the PZ, KPFW, 3 OSF.G. This wasn't some battlefield trophy. It was legally purchased through a Soviet-German trade deal. For the Soviets, it was like getting the keys to a rival's sports car, and what they found inside was nothing short of shocking. A sneak peek at the enemy's ride. Back in 1939, the Soviets only got a distant look at German tanks during the invasion of Poland. They managed to snag a couple of lighter PZ, 2 tanks, but those were like getting a used pickup truck. Nothing to write home about. The PZ-3, though, that was a whole different beast. The Soviets hadn't captured any in battle, so when this 20-ton beast, officially dubbed the Daimler-Benz medium tank, rolled into their testing ground in Kubinka, near Moscow, it was a big deal. There's even a hilarious story from a Soviet visit to Germany. A gutsy Soviet lieutenant named Kachenko saw an unguarded PZ-3 and thought, why not? He hopped in and drove it straight to his unit's base. Talk about a joyride. Of course, the higher-ups weren't thrilled, and the tank was returned with a stern slap on the wrist for the culprits. But it shows how desperate the Soviets were to crack open German engineering. The PZ-3 that arrived in Kubinka was a late model, packing a 37mm KWK-L/45 gun. Soon after, the Germans would upgrade it to a beefier 50mm KWK-L/42. But even this version was a game changer. The Soviets put it through its paces, comparing it to their own T-34 and BT-7 tanks. What they found left them stunned. Test track showdowns and mind-blowing results. The Kubinka proving ground became the stage for a tank showdown. The German PZ-3 hit a jaw-dropping speed of 69.7 kilometers per hour. That's about 43 miles per hour on the highway, faster than the Soviet BT-7 on tracks, and way quicker than the T-34. This speed came from a slick 10-speed Maybach transmission that let the engine roar at full power. The catch? Pushing the tank that fast wore out the rubber on its road wheels. So the Germans capped it at around 25 miles per hour to save wear and tear. The Soviets, though, didn't care about the fine print. They wanted to see what this tank could do in a fight. The transmission was a revelation. Its perfectly tuned gear ratios let the engine shine, making the tank handle like a dream. Funnily enough, the Germans themselves found the 10-speed setup a bit clunky and later switched to a simpler 6-speed version. But for the Soviets, this was a wake-up call. Their own transmissions were nowhere near this smooth. Then there was the crew comfort. Oh man, it was next level. The PZ-3's interior was roomy, with great visibility and top-notch communication systems, both inside the tank and with other units. The real kicker? It had a 5-man crew. Unlike the T-34, where the commander was stuck doubling as the gunner or loader, the PZ-3's commander could focus purely on leading the battle. That's a massive edge when shells are flying. The commander's cupola, giving a full 360-degree view, was another shocker. The Soviets had nothing like it, and it got their engineers thinking hard about upgrading their own designs. The PZ-3 suspension was another standout, keeping the tank steady enough to fire accurately even after short stops. Compare that to the T-34's Christie suspension, which bounced like a bucking bronco and made aiming on the move a nightmare. But the real gut punch came when they tested the armor. The Soviets fired their 45mm anti-tank gun, the 1937 model, at the PZ-3. From 300 meters, about 330 yards, it couldn't punch through. Even at 400 meters, 440 yards, only 2 out of 5 shots penetrated, and only if they hit at a shallow 30-degree angle. The German tank's 32mm cemented armor was as tough as 42 to 44 millimeters of Soviet steel, and its hardness caused bullets to ricochet like ping-pong balls. This was a serious problem for Soviet anti-tank crews. Lessons that shook the Soviet tank world. The test results hit like a thunderbolt. A report led by engineer E. Saddle spelled it out. The PZ-3 wasn't just a tank, it was a wake-up call. The Soviet Tank Command, led by General Fedorenko, sent a memo to Defense Minister Voroshilov in September 1940, laying out a game plan to level up their tanks. They wanted a commander's cupola for a full view of the battlefield, better escape hatches for the crew, improved engine cooling systems, a transmission inspired by the German design, fuel tanks separated from the fighting compartment, a smarter layout for the radio. By October, the Soviet tank program revised its requirements. Marshal Timoshenko sent another report to Voroshilov, pushing for freeing the commander from gunner or loader duties, installing commander's cupolas, swapping bulky microphones for throat mics for clearer comms, better visibility for the driver, easier-to-use controls, switching to individual torsion bar suspension, exploring planetary transmissions. These weren't just copycat moves. They were lessons that sparked innovation. For example, the 3-man turret with the commander's cupola showed up in the T-50 tank project. By the war's end, these ideas helped birth the T-44, a tank that set the stage for the Soviet Union's post-war armor dominance. The bigger picture, why it matters. To understand why the PZ-3 tests were such a big deal, let's zoom out. In 1940, the Soviet Union was churning out tanks like nobody's business, around 10,000 a year, according to historical records. But quantity didn't always mean quality. The T-34 was a beast on paper, with thick sloped armor and a powerful gun, but had flaws: clunky transmissions, cramped interiors, and poor visibility. Germany, on the other hand, was all about precision. They produced fewer tanks, about 2,000 in 1940, but each one was a masterpiece of engineering. German industry, still riding high from pre-war economic growth, focused on details like crew comfort and mechanical reliability. The PZ-3 was proof of that approach, and it forced the Soviets to rethink their game plan. When World War II hit the Soviet Union in 1941, these lessons paid off. The Red Army wasn't caught completely off guard, thanks in part to the PZ-3 tests. By 1942, further tests of captured German tanks in Kazan built on these findings, but it was the 1940 Kubinka trials that lit the spark. They shattered the Soviets' confidence in their own superiority and pushed them to innovate faster. Why should Americans care? This story isn't just about tanks. It's about staying sharp in a competitive world. For American readers, think of it like this. Imagine a U.S. tech company getting hold of a rival's prototype smartphone in 1999, testing it, finding it's better in key ways, and using those insights to build something even greater. That's what the Soviets did with the PZ-3, and it's a playbook that applies today. In the modern world, whether it's AI, electric vehicles, or military tech, staying ahead means learning from the competition. The U.S. defense industry, for example, spends billions, over $700 billion in 2025 per budget reports, on cutting-edge systems. But without studying rivals like China or Russia, that money could be wasted on outdated designs. The PZ-3 story is a reminder. Don't get cocky, and always keep an eye on what others are doing. Plus, there's a human angle here. The PZ-3's 5-man crew setup meant better teamwork, which saved lives in battle. That focus on people, making sure they can do their jobs effectively, resonates in any high-stakes field, from a military to corporate boardrooms. It's about giving your team the tools to succeed. The PZ-3 tests in 1940 were a turning point for Soviet tank design. They didn't just copy the Germans. They took the best ideas and made them their own, paving the way for tanks like the T-44 that dominated post-war battlefields. It's a story of humility, innovation, and grit, qualities that resonate whether you're in a tank or a tech startup. So what's the takeaway? Never underestimate your rivals, and always be ready to learn. The Soviets did, and it helped them turn the tide in World War II. For us today, it's a call to stay curious and keep pushing forward. Hey, tank fans, if you love this deep dive into the PZ-3's impact, hit that subscribe button to catch more stories like this. Drop a comment below. Tell us what blew your mind about this German tank, or how you think its lessons apply to today's world. Let's keep the conversation rolling.